They doubted her. They whispered behind her back. The professor tried to humiliate her in front of everyone. But when she picked up the chalk, she did something no one saw coming. Monica Ellison entered the lecture hall, her grip tightening on her backpack strap. The air was thick, heavy with the silent weight of expectation. This wasn't a new feeling for her, walking into spaces where judgment preceded her very presence. But today it felt different. She settled into a front-row seat, opening her notebook. Around her, students murmured, some exchanging glances, others engrossed in their phones, awaiting the start of class. The room itself was imposing. High ceilings, rows of seats stretching to the back, and a massive chalkboard dominating the front. A place designed to make students feel insignificant, to remind them they had to earn their worth. Dr. Richard Henshaw strode in, commanding instant silence. His reputation preceded him. Brilliant, ruthless, a professor who took pride in dismantling students before forging them anew. Yet not everyone was granted the chance to be rebuilt. Monica had navigated pressure before. Long nights, grueling problem sets, competitions where a single misstep could mean everything. But this was different. This wasn't merely about proving her grasp of calculus. It was about asserting her right to belong. Henshaw placed his leather-bound notebook on the desk, his gaze sweeping the room. It bypassed the students in designer sweaters and tailored blazers, finally landing on Monica. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smirk, but close. "Miss Ellison," he drawled, stretching her name just enough to make it sound alien. "Let's see what you've got. Come up and solve this for us." A quiet stir rippled through the room, not just students shifting but something else. Interest, curiosity, perhaps even a hint of amusement. Monica knew precisely what this was. A test, and not just an academic one. She closed her notebook and rose, walking to the front with deliberate steps. No haste, no hesitation. Any sign of nerves would only confirm their preconceived notions. Henshaw handed her the chalk, stepping aside. She stared at the equation, clearly designed to trip students up. A multivariate function demanding both precision and intuition. Not impossible, but difficult enough to turn anyone into an example. She heard a whisper behind her, "She's going to mess it up." Another voice, more skeptical than cruel, "Let's see if she even knows where to start." He tuned them out. Numbers had always made more sense to her than people. The question wasn't whether she could solve it. It was whether they were ready for her to. Taking a breath, she lifted the chalk and made her first mark. She wasn't just going to solve it, she was going to redefine their perception of her. The instant Monica's chalk met the board, the room hushed. The faint rustle of paper, the quiet tap of a pen, all faded as eyes fixed on her. She moved with confident precision, writing out the initial steps without a flicker of hesitation. The problem wasn't just about the correct answer. It was about elegance. A straightforward path would work, but Monica saw a more direct route, one that bypassed needless steps. A solution recognized only by someone with true mastery of the material. Dr. Henshaw stood with his arms crossed, his usual mask of controlled indifference hardening into intense focus. He wasn't merely observing, he was waiting for her to falter. Monica reached the midpoint of the solution, pausing briefly to review her work. It wasn't doubt, it was ingrained habit. She'd learned long ago that every move would be scrutinized, so she ensured there was nothing to question. The whispers that had started earlier had ceased. Students who'd exchanged smug glances now leaned forward, some adjusting their seats as if to get a clearer view. She continued, the equation unraveling before her, each piece falling into place exactly as she'd foreseen. Behind her, someone let out a sharp exhale. "She's actually doing it," another voice, lower, almost begrudging, added, "and she's doing it fast." Dr. Henshaw cleared his throat, shifting his weight. "Make sure you're not skipping important steps, Miss Ellison," he said, his voice even but with an underlying edge. Monica didn't turn. "I'm not." A ripple of reaction moved through the class, not because of her words, but how she delivered them. Calm, steady, absolute. She wrote her final equation, boxed the answer, then stepped back, placing the chalk on the ledge below the board. Silence. For a moment, it felt like the entire room held its breath. Dr. Henshaw stepped forward, his eyes scanning her work. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he traced the solution with his fingers, checking each transition. The longer he stood, the clearer it became. He wasn't looking for confirmation. He was searching for a mistake. Monica watched, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, Henshaw exhaled a short breath, his jaw tightening as he turned back to the class. An unconventional approach, he said, but correct. The words hung in the air, an admission he hadn't expected to make. Then from the back of the room another voice spoke. That wasn't just correct, Dr. Elaine Parker said, rising from her seat. That was brilliant. But while one professor acknowledged her, the other wasn't ready to let Monica own the moment just yet. Dr. Henshaw's fingers tapped lightly against the podium as he processed what had just transpired. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by something more rigid. He turned back to the board, glancing over Monica's work again, searching for a flaw, a weakness, anything that would allow him to regain control. The students sat frozen, their attention fixed on what would happen next. Monica felt their stares, the weight of their shifting opinions. Some had expected her to stumble, but now they waited for Henshaw's next move. Interesting, he finally said, his voice measured. But let's take a closer look. Monica exhaled quietly, already anticipating his next step. When someone like Henshaw lost control of the narrative, they didn't admit defeat, they redirected. He picked up a fresh piece of chalk and underlined part of her solution. You chose to bypass the traditional method here, cutting directly to the derivative transformation. He turned, tilting his head. Tell me, Miss Ellison, why did you assume this was the best approach? There it was, a subtle trap disguised as a question. He wasn't doubting her answer. He was questioning her authority to make that decision in the first place. Monica didn't flinch. Because the traditional method introduces unnecessary steps. This approach eliminates redundant calculations and reaches the answer faster. A few students shifted in their seats, some scribbling notes, realizing she had just explained a more efficient way to solve the problem than what they had been taught. Henshaw raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. And what if I told you that cutting steps can sometimes lead to miscalculations? Monica met his gaze evenly. But it didn't. A low chuckle escaped from somewhere in the room. The tension cracked just slightly as students recognized what had just happened. Dr. Henshaw pursed his lips, his grip on the chalk tightening. Confidence is commendable, Miss Ellison, but let's test it, shall we? He turned back to the board and with swift movements wrote out another equation. This one was even more complex. A problem layered with variables, limits, and exponentials, designed to trip up anyone who dared attempt it without careful planning. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the board. Let's see if your method holds up here. Monica didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, picked up the chalk and studied the equation. It was difficult, that much was clear. But difficult wasn't impossible. She started writing. This time she felt the weight of the room differently, not just expectation but something else. Genuine interest, pure curiosity. The once dismissive glances had vanished. Students who had barely acknowledged her before were now leaning forward, their pens hovering over their notebooks, eager to see her approach. She worked through the first set of transformations, moving with the same controlled precision as before. No pauses, no second-guessing. The board filled with calculations, each line flowing seamlessly into the next. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Dr. Henshaw remained silent, watching as the problem unfolded before him. Finally, Monica reached the end. She boxed her answer, capped the marker and stepped back. She turned to face him. That's the solution. Henshaw stared at the board, his face betraying nothing, but his silence spoke louder than words. Then Dr. Parker stood from the back of the room. That, she said, walking toward the front, is nothing short of genius. But while the professors were processing what had just happened, the real shift was occurring among the students. The energy in the room had changed. What had begun as a quiet test of Monica's abilities had transformed into something else. Something undeniable. Students who had barely paid her any attention before now sat up, their expressions ranging from intrigue to outright astonishment. Some whispered to each other, not in mockery this time but in genuine curiosity. Did you see that? One murmured. She skipped 3 steps and still got it right, another replied. Monica could hear them but she didn't react. She simply returned to her seat, calm and composed as if she hadn't just flipped the entire room's perception of her on its head. Dr. Parker, now standing near the board, crossed her arms and studied the work. Not only is it correct, but she found an optimization most students wouldn't even consider. She turned slightly, her gaze shifting to Dr. Henshaw. You should be impressed. Henshaw's jaw tightened for just a second, so quick that most wouldn't have noticed. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie as he stepped forward. It's certainly a different approach, he said, reaching for the chalk. But Parker cut him off. No need. Her tone was light but firm. I've already checked it. It's flawless. For the first time, Henshaw hesitated. He had built his career on being the final authority in his classroom, the one who dictated what was right, what was acceptable, what was worthy of recognition. And yet here was a first-year student, one he had clearly underestimated, challenging that unspoken order without ever saying a word. Monica kept her eyes forward, waiting for what would come next. A few seats over, a student who had previously scoffed at her now raised his hand. Professor, he asked, hesitating slightly, can Monica explain how she saw that shortcut? I wouldn't have even thought to approach it that way. Monica blinked, momentarily surprised. She had expected resistance, maybe even more dismissal. But this was different. Dr. Parker nodded. That's an excellent idea. He turned to Monica. Would you mind walking them through your reasoning? For the first time that day, Monica hesitated, not because she was unsure of herself, but because she had never been asked to explain her thought process in a way that wasn't a test. She glanced at the board, gathering her thoughts before speaking. I looked at the structure of the equation first, she said, her voice steady but measured. Instead of working through the standard steps, I recognized a pattern in the coefficients that allowed me to factor out certain terms early. That simplified the problem before I even started solving. A few students nodded, some scribbling notes, others staring at the board as if seeing it differently for the first time. That's why you skipped the second step, one of them muttered under his breath, mostly to himself. It wasn't a guess. It was intentional. Dr. Parker smiled slightly. Exactly. Henshaw remained quiet, watching the room shift around him. The students who once followed his lead, taking his judgments at face value, were now looking at Monica in a way they hadn't before, with respect. It wasn't instant, it wasn't unanimous, but it was there, creeping in, breaking through the assumptions that had lingered when she first walked in. Monica didn't need their validation, she had never sought it. But seeing the doubt in their eyes turn into something else, that was its own kind of victory. But the real moment of reckoning wasn't with the students. It was what Dr. Henshaw would do next. Dr. Henshaw stood stiffly at the front of the room, his usual air of control slipping through his fingers. The class wasn't waiting for him anymore. Their attention had shifted to Monica, to her work, to the realization that she wasn't just capable, she was exceptional. He could feel it, the subtle change in the air. The students who once hung on to his every word were now looking at him, waiting to see how he would respond. His grip on the chalk tightened. Well, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral, it seems Miss Ellison has a unique way of approaching the material. Unique, a word that danced dangerously close to dismissal. Dr. Parker, standing a few feet away, caught it immediately. I'd call it advanced, she countered, tilting her head slightly. She didn't just solve the problem, she optimized it. That's not just talent, that's mastery. Henshaw's lips pressed into a thin line. He was cornered and he knew it. His usual tactics wouldn't work here, not after Monica had proven herself so decisively, not with Parker reinforcing it. So he did what men like him did best. He adjusted his tie, forced a thin smile and nodded. Yes, well, I suppose we'll see how she performs on the next exam. Monica didn't flinch, but she understood exactly what he meant. This wasn't over. But it didn't have to be. She had made her point. As the class gathered their things, the murmurs returned, but they were different now. Students who had ignored her before now glanced at her with curiosity, some with admiration, others with quiet uncertainty, as if they were recalibrating their assumptions in real time. One of them, a guy who had openly doubted her earlier, hesitated as she packed her bag. Hey, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. That was impressive. Monica didn't pause. I know. He blinked, then let out a small laugh. All right then. She slung her backpack over her shoulder, walking toward the exit, her steps steady. She had spent years proving herself in spaces that weren't made for her. This was nothing new. But today something had shifted, not just in the room, not just in the way people saw her, but in the way she saw herself. She had known her worth before. Now they did too. Because respect isn't given, it's earned. and she had just earned it. Monica stepped out of the lecture hall, the door clicking shut behind her. The cool afternoon air hit her skin, a sharp contrast to the tension that had filled the room moments ago. She took a deep breath, letting the weight of the past hour settle. She had done it, not just solved the problem, not just stood her ground against Dr. Henshaw. She had changed something. She pulled out her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly through her messages as she made her way across campus. A notification popped up. Her friend Jordan had texted her. "Jordan, how was class?" Monica smirked, thumbs flying over the screen. "Monica. Same as usual, except I just made Henshaw eat his own words." The typing bubble popped up almost immediately. "Jordan. No way, what happened?" Monica considered how to summarize it in a single message. "Monica. Let's just say he thought he could embarrass me. He ended up embarrassing himself." Jordan's reply came in seconds. "Jordan. That man has been a problem for years. About time someone put him in his place." Monica exhaled a short laugh. She wasn't naive. One class, one moment wouldn't change everything. Henshaw wasn't going to suddenly respect her. Some students would still see her as an outsider. But this wasn't about them. It was about every student who would come after her. The ones who would sit in that same room, face the same challenges, feel the same weight of expectation pressing down on them. She had cracked something open today, forced people to see her not as an anomaly, not as an exception, but as exactly what she was: brilliant, unapologetic, unshaken. And that mattered. She slipped her phone into her pocket, her steps lighter than they had been that morning. Because respect wasn't something you waited for. It was something you demanded. And she would demand it every single time. If you've ever felt underestimated, let this be your reminder. Your talent speaks for itself. You don't need permission to be great. Keep pushing. Keep proving them wrong. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter.